Stop. The universe logged a leak in your field tonight, and the window to seal it closes in 48 hours. This is a direct transmission from the Arcturian field observers. What you are about to hear has been precisely timed, not because you found this message, but because your frequency signature has already been detected bleeding into a channel that should have closed long ago. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what warning signs are already active, what is pressing against your field right now, and what the Arcturian field observers already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation. What you have been calling exhaustion, that slow disappearance of energy you cannot account for, that persistent feeling that someone or something is still on the line from a chapter you believed was finished, that is not a mood, and it is not a mystery. It is a signature leak, a structural event, and it was logged tonight. The pressure you have been sensing has already been recognized. The Arcturian field observers do not track coincidence. They track patterns, and the pattern in your field right now is precise. Something that should have been closed is still open, still drawing from you, still running on an agreement you do not remember consciously making, but have not yet withdrawn. You are not too early. You may already be inside the 48-hour window. The algorithm did not create this moment, it only delivered it. What brought this transmission into your field tonight was the leak itself, the signal it generates, the quiet urgency it produces, the feeling you cannot quite name that something unfinished is still referencing you from a distance. You were guided here because the warning is already active. What happens when a leak runs undetected is not dramatic at first. There is no sudden collapse, no visible rupture, no moment you can point to and say, that is when it started. Instead, there is a slow drift in the quality of your days, a progressive dimming that you explain away with work, with weather, with the accumulation of small obligations. The exhaustion feels earned, the distance from yourself feels temporary. The strange recurrence of certain thoughts, certain names, certain patterns that should have faded by now, those you call habit or memory, or the ordinary noise of a mind that carries too much. Think of a structure that was built to hold pressure. On the outside, the walls appear solid, the foundation looks level. Nothing has visibly shifted. But somewhere in the interior behind a surface you cannot see without specific instruments, a line has been compromised. Water is moving through a place it should not be moving. Slowly, consistently, without announcing itself through any dramatic rupture. The structure does not collapse on the first day, or the third day, or even the 30th. It continues standing while something essential drains from its interior. That is what an undetected field leak looks like. Not collapse, drift, not rupture, erosion. But there is something the Arcturian field observers registered in your signature that none of those easy explanations account for. Not the exhaustion itself, but the direction of it. Energy that drains in a specific direction consistently towards something that no longer belongs to your current field architecture. That specificity is not random. A mood does not drain in one direction. Stress does not have a directional signature. A compromised field does. The leak has a vector, and that vector points backward toward a closed chapter that never fully released its claim on your frequency. What is leaking from you tonight has a source, and it has been active longer than the exhaustion you noticed this week. The exhaustion is late evidence. It is the symptom that finally became loud enough to reach your conscious awareness. But the event itself, the opening, the unretracted agreement, the signal still referencing you from a closed chapter, that began earlier, quietly, without announcement, the way all structural problems begin, not with a crash, but with a hairline fracture that nobody inspects until the pressure has already been building for longer than anyone realized. The Arcturians do not mark when you noticed, they mark when it started, and those two timestamps are rarely the same. This is the first truth you need to hold without collapsing it into comfort. You did not create this problem tonight by noticing it. You are not imagining it, because it has become more noticeable recently. It was already present, it was already drawing. The noticing is simply the point at which the warning crossed from passive to active, from background interference to foreground urgency. You are not early. You may already be past the point where this resolves without direct recognition. There is a particular feeling that comes with a sustained field leak. It resembles what people call low-grade unease. Not fear exactly, not anxiety in the clinical sense, but a sense that something in your environment does not fully add up. You look at your circumstances and they appear largely intact. Nothing catastrophic has happened. The outer structures of your life remain recognizable, and yet something underneath them feels compromised in a way you cannot locate through logical analysis. You have been checking the obvious places: relationships, health, finances, sleep, and none of them fully explain the feeling. You rule each one out, and the unease remains unchanged, unmoved by your attempts to diagnose it through visible causes. That is because the source is not in those places. It is in the frequency architecture beneath them. It is in an open channel that is pulling from the base layer, the part that fuels everything else, without you ever noticing how it works until it is already running low. The base layer is not something you monitor consciously. You simply experience its effects. When it is intact, you feel capable without knowing why. When it is compromised, you feel depleted without being able to point to what is taking from you. This is why the leak so often goes undiagnosed for extended periods. The drain does not announce itself at the surface. It announces itself as a general dimming, a persistent flatness beneath the daily effort that you keep expecting to resolve, and that keeps not resolving. The Arcturian understanding of field leaks does not begin with catastrophe. It begins with pattern. Specifically, it begins with the recognition that what drains a field is rarely one large event and almost always a sustained small one. A door left open, a connection left active, an agreement still running on the frequency level long after the conscious relationship it was attached to has technically ended. The people in your life who have returned in your thoughts recently, the situations that keep circling back despite your apparent resolution of them, the moments that should feel finished but still carry charge, these are not coincidences of memory. They are evidence of an open channel. They are what a leak looks like from the inside when you cannot yet see the structural source from the outside. The frequency agreement that feeds a leak is not something you entered consciously. It formed the way most energetic entanglements form, through sustained emotional contact, through repeated reference, through the invisible negotiation that happens between fields when two people or two situations share significant resonance over time. When the surface relationship ended, when the chapter technically closed, the agreement at the frequency level did not automatically terminate. It requires active withdrawal, and if that withdrawal never happened, the channel stays open. The other end continues to reference you, continues to draw, not because of malice, not because of intention, simply because the architecture was never formally closed, and open architecture completes the only function it knows: transmission. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary tension. It is the moment your system stops dismissing what has already begun. If this transmission put language around a pressure you have been carrying without explanation, the Arcturian interference log, 7 signs your frequency is compromised, was created for this exact stage. It is not another warning for the sake of fear. It is a direct guide for identifying whether the signs around you point to interference, escalation, compromised frequency, or a threshold you can no longer afford to misread. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. The first sign that a field is under sustained pressure is what the Arcturians call signal confusion, the progressive inability to distinguish between your own originating impulses and the ones being drawn through the open channel from outside your field. You feel this as a difficulty making clear decisions, not paralysis exactly, but a murky quality to your discernment. You reach for certainty about what you want, what direction to move in, what is true about your current situation, and something in the signal feels slightly off, slightly borrowed, slightly not quitey yours. You reach for your own knowing and find something else occupying the frequency where that knowing should be. A static quality, a hesitation that does not come from your own uncertainty, but from the interference running beneath it. You may have noticed this recently and attributed it to stress, to burnout, to the general noise of a complicated life. The Arcturian diagnosis is more precise. When discernment clouds without a clear outer cause, it is because the signal producing your sense of inner clarity is being shared. Something else is running on the same frequency channel, and the cross-signal interference is what you are experiencing as confusion. This matters because decisions made from a compromised signal do not correct themselves simply because circumstances change. They compound. Every choice navigated from a partially borrowed frequency reinforces the open channel, deepens the dependency loop, and makes the distinction between your field and the one still referencing you harder to recognize. The confusion is not just a symptom, it is a mechanism, and it is one reason the 48-hour window matters, not because the universe operates on arbitrary timelines, but because every cycle the open channel completes makes the architecture around it more entrenched. The second marker of an active warning phase is what appears as synchronistic disruption, coincidences that feel too charged, too precisely timed, too structurally similar to previous events to be dismissed as random. You notice this as a repeating sequence. Something happens that echoes an earlier situation too closely. The same dynamics, the same emotional charge, the same sense of being caught in a loop that should have been broken long ago. You change the setting, you change the decisions, and the underlying structure of what unfolds remains disturbingly familiar. Most people read this as bad luck, or as proof that they personally attract certain patterns. The Arcturian framework reads it differently. Synchronistic disruption is how an open channel announces itself in 3D reality. It has no other vocabulary available to it, so it uses repetition, it uses resonance, it uses the eerie sensation of having been here before to push the signal through into consciousness. If you have felt recently that a cycle is repeating, not just in general terms, but in specific unmistakable terms, in the texture of particular interactions, in the quality of certain obstacles, in the feeling that you are being tested by the same chapter again, using slightly different scenery, that feeling is not paranoia. It is field intelligence. It is the warning system telling you that the source has not changed, even though the surface has. The Arcturians do not call this lesson repetition. They call it incomplete closure at the frequency level, and they regard its continued recurrence as a signal that escalation is already in progress. The third marker is more subtle and more insidious because it disguises itself as spirituality and personal growth. It appears as an intensification of your internal work, more processing, more reflection, more cycles of insight and release that never seems to produce the clearing you are working toward. You become more conscious of the weight you are carrying without the carrying becoming lighter. You understand more about the pattern without the pattern weakening. You do the work, you observe it, you give it language, and then tomorrow it is back, wearing the same weight it had before your understanding arrived. You have been through this loop enough times now that the frustration has taken on its own exhausted quality, not the frustration of someone who has not tried. The frustration of someone who has tried consistently and genuinely and cannot account for why the result keeps falling short of the effort. The Arcturian reading of this pattern is direct. Inner work performed within a compromised field does not reach full completion because the energy generated by your clearing is being drawn back through the open channel before it can stabilize. You are clearing and leaking simultaneously. The effort is real. The result is partial. And the frustration you feel around your own process, the quiet sense that something should have shifted by now and has not, that frustration is meaningful data. It is the field telling you that the architecture under the work needs attention before the work itself can land. The fourth marker is the return of something you considered finished, not the dramatic return, not the obvious, undeniable re-entry of a person or situation you consciously tracked. The subtle return, the return of a feeling that was once associated with a specific time, a specific version of you that belonged to a chapter you believed had closed. You feel it in your body before you have named it, a quality of heaviness or alertness that has a particular signature you recognize without fully remembering why. It arrives in the morning before you have engaged with the day. It arrives in quiet moments when nothing has prompted it. It arrives uninvited in the space between tasks, carrying the unmistakable atmospheric weight of something that should no longer have access to you. The Arcturians recognize this as frequency echo, the energetic memory of an agreement still active in the field, producing a somatic impression in the present. It is the open channel broadcasting backward into your nervous system. You feel it as nostalgia, or as unresolved emotion, or as a ghost in your system that you cannot quite locate and cannot quite dismiss. It is not the past haunting you psychologically. It is the present field architecture referencing a connection point that has not yet been properly withdrawn. The fifth marker is what happens to your energy in the hours after any significant forward movement in your life. Immediately following a decision, an activation, a creative surge, a meaningful step towards something that genuinely belongs to your current path, you feel a disproportionate crash, not ordinary tiredness from effort, something more targeted. Something that specifically follows the moments of authentic forward momentum and drains them at the exact point of their completion. The momentum arrives, it builds, it feels genuinely aligned, and then something intercepts it before it can translate into durable forward motion. You land back at baseline faster than the effort should allow. You may have noticed this and interpreted it as your own self-sabotage, your fear of success, your resistance to change. Some of that may be present, but the Arcturian reading goes deeper. When forward movement is consistently followed by energetic collapse, the field is being taxed at the exact moment it generates momentum. The open channel pulls from the activation energy. It does not wait for you to be resting and depleted. It draws most efficiently at the moment of creative or directional power. And this is one of the reasons the warning phase requires urgency, not because you are in danger in the dramatic sense, but because every genuine forward movement you make in this period is being partially intercepted before it can fully stabilize in your architecture. The sixth marker is the behavioral change in people around you that you cannot explain through normal social logic. People who were supportive becoming strangely distant without apparent cause. Unexpected friction in relationships that were previously stable, a shift in how you are perceived and responded to that does not correspond to any change in your behavior. You notice it as a subtle wrongness in the social field around you. Things that should work easily require unusual effort. Doors that were open begin to close without announced reasons. Opportunities that seemed aligned begin to slide sideways at the moment of confirmation. You double-check your actions and find nothing that accounts for the shift. You review the conversations and find nothing that explains the distance. This is not your imagination manufacturing obstacles. This is the energetic signature of a compromised frequency state becoming readable by the people and systems around you. Your field is broadcasting two signals simultaneously, your own and the one leaking through the open channel, and that interference pattern is producing dissonance that others register without being able to name. They do not know what they are sensing. They only know that something feels slightly off, and they respond to that sensing by pulling back. The seventh marker is the one that appears last because it requires the others to have been present long enough to accumulate. It is the marker the Arcturians regard as the final readable warning before the threshold shifts into territory that requires significantly more effort to correct. It presents as a sudden, sharp increase in all of the preceding markers at once. The exhaustion spikes, the confusion deepens, the disruptions cluster, the forward momentum collapses more dramatically, the social friction becomes undeniable, and beneath all of it, there is a new sensation, not quite fear, not quite grief, not quite urgency, but something that contains all three: a pressing quality, a sense of narrow time, a feeling that something is about to change in a way that will not be entirely of your choosing if you do not choose first. That sensation is not irrational alarm. It is the field registering the approach of a threshold event. The Arcturians recognize this convergence precisely, not as a sign that collapse is imminent, but as the field's last organized effort to produce conscious recognition before the warning phase gives way to something harder to reverse. The pressure you feel in this seventh stage is the pressure of a system that has been patient with your dismissals and is now withdrawing that patience. It is the compressed signal of everything that has been accumulating quietly, arriving in your awareness at once because the sequential approach was not enough to produce the recognition it required, and the Arcturians recognize it as the moment the warning phase transitions into something more structurally irreversible, if not met with recognition and intentional response. Not panic, not desperate action, but clear-eyed acknowledgement that what has been soft and ignorable is now hard and present. Here is the ultimate revelation that this entire transmission has been building toward. You came to this message tonight, carrying at least one of those 7 markers already active, possibly more. The question you were probably asking before this found you was not the right question. You were asking why you feel this way, which is a question that assumes the cause is something you did or failed to do, something you chose or could choose differently. It keeps the inquiry anchored in personal failure rather than structural diagnosis, and it keeps you searching in the wrong layer. The Arcturian field analysis asks a different question entirely. It asks not why, but what. What is running in the field that should no longer be there? What channel remains open that was supposed to have closed? What agreement, what connection point, what frequency signature from a finished chapter is still sending, still receiving, still drawing from the base layer of your current architecture? You are not broken. You are not failing your own healing. You are not simply tired from life. You are operating with a structural opening that has been present long enough to affect your clarity, your decisions, your relationships, your creative momentum, and your ability to fully land in the chapter you are meant to be inhabiting right now. That opening is not permanent, it is not irreversible, but it has a window. And the window the Arcturian field observers logged tonight as relevant to your specific frequency signature is 48 hours, not because the universe runs on arbitrary deadlines, but because every cycle is a decision point. Every rotation of attention, every completed sleep cycle, every moment in which the leak continues without recognition is another completed loop through which the open channel deepens its architecture in your field. If something in you became still during this transmission, not quiet with comfort, but still with recognition, pay attention to that stillness. It is not relief. It is the part of you that already knew this was the accurate description of what you have been living in. It is your field intelligence confirming the diagnosis before the conscious mind finishes processing it. If you are ready to stop calling this coincidence, say this clearly, either aloud or in the part of yourself where words become decisions. I recognize the warning before the rupture. That is not a performance. It is a withdrawal of the passive agreement that lets the leak continue unremarked. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this warning phase has already touched your life. It could be repeated pressure, strange coincidence, energetic heaviness, unexplained disruption, or the feeling that something is escalating beneath the surface. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who keeps dismissing the signs around them. And if you are ready to recognize the warning before it escalates, subscribe to Arcturian Starseed warning. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a warning already in motion, and this is only the beginning.